Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to May's Football Transfer Forum. We're in May already. We know the Champions League finalists. The European Championships are just around the corner. Tony, I've been out for a few meals in beer gardens. I've been out for a pint. Liverpool are struggling. The world's healing, Tony. The world is healing. Welcome, everybody. Great to have everybody with us this morning. As usual, we've pulled out all the top stops and we've got some great guests with us this morning that we're going to get through all of that premium content of the football industry over the next 90 minutes. As always, bit of housekeeping. If you've got any questions, please get them in the Q&A box. That gives me the best opportunity to get them asked for you. Also, feel free to share your contact details or any general comments in the chat section as well. Tony, before I bring in and introduce the other guests, good morning to you. How are you?
Yeah, morning, Ryan. I'm good, thanks. Yes, it was great to see the young players shining for Chelsea and Man City and getting to the Champions League final. I think this month things have started to happen in the world of transfers and agents. I've had several meetings with clubs and conversations with clubs. I think most teams know which league they're going to be, so the scouts can throw away that I'm in the Championship list or I'm in the League One list. There is a few interesting things happening at the bottom end of tables, and obviously we're going to have the playoffs as well coming at the end of the month. So things are starting to move already in the transfer window. People are starting to talk about deals and tee things up in preparation, and I'm hoping for a busy summer.
Fantastic, excellent. Well, as I'm sure you can already see, we've got three great guests with us today. First of all, we're really delighted to have Les Reed with us, most recently technical director at the Football Association, but of course an absolutely stellar career in the game as well. Les, good morning.
Morning, Ryan. Morning, guys.
Morning. Now, Les, Tony is very precious about his background, and I've got to say, I think your background is probably, it's the most sort of ornate, most football prestigious one that we've had there. Just let us know who have we got on the shirt in the background there.
Well, the number 7, that's David Beckham. That was from Euro 2000. The other two shirts, the green and the white one, are pretty historic game. If we've got any Northern Ireland fans here, was when I decamped from England to Northern Ireland with Laurie Sanchez, and we beat England at Windsor Park. So they're two of the match shirts signed by both teams there, and I think that's the programme you can see in the middle. So they're my favourite shirts, those three. There are a few upstairs, but they're my three favourite ones.
Good stuff. We look forward to coming back to and having a proper chat with you very shortly. Well, a different type of background, editor at FC Business. Aaron, is that a Jackson Pollock we've got going on there?
It's a very fake Jackson Pollock, yeah. It is. Well spotted.
Yeah, my son's just done something very similar that I'm going to send across to you in the post.
The idea
how are you, Aaron?
I'm very well. The idea was to get my daughter to do that, but she couldn't be bothered. So yeah, I'm all good. Yeah,
excellent. Fantastic. Look forward to hearing about what's going on in FC Business a little bit later as well. And a man who's absolutely famous for product placement in his background, and he's not let us down again today. Friend of the Football Transfer Forum, and of course, absolute Messi, the Ronaldo, the Steve Bull of football finance. Kieran Mcguire. Kieran, how are you?
I'm absolutely fantastic. Thanks, Ryan. Celebrating Brighton's victory against Leeds over the weekend, and it looks like our 5th season in the Premier League is 99% of the way there.
Kieran, you were talking about GX to me in the prep session, and just explain where Brighton are in the GX table.
We are in a Champions League place. If we could actually turn chances into goals, I'd be planning my European tour next season.
So you need in the fantasy GX division, you're in the Champions League, but do you need a striker then to put away all those chances?
If there's anybody out there, I think yes. I'm sure that Graham and Paul Barber at the club will be interested to hear any offers.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I'll briefly share what the agenda for today is looking like. So we're gonna have a good chat. We've got a good half an hour with Les this morning. Then Aaron's going to give us an update on everything that's going on at FC Business, of course, the trade publication for the UK football industry. And then we're really interested to speak to Kieran, particularly about certain clubs that Tony may or may not be able to do business in the way that they wanted this summer. Tony, just before we do get going, you just touched on it. You just touched on it there, but I did just want to ask you, things now sort of generally warming up towards the summer transfer window?
Yeah, definitely, Ryan. I mean, we're going to talk about the window later on in the webinar, but yes, I think once we get, most teams know which league they're going to be playing in next season, and I think once we get into May, I think that's when conversations start happening. I've certainly been quite active in the last couple of weeks, so conversations start happening. Obviously, things aren't finalized. We have got the playoffs around the corner, and I think there's a bit more optimism in the game because we can see that crowds have actually come back. I know there were only test events and there's talk about crowds coming back into the Premier League, but that's giving clubs a little bit more confidence as we go forward. You couldn't plan, and I'm sure Kieran knows better than myself, but you couldn't plan your budget for last season. Nobody could have foreseen what was going to happen. But I think there's a bit more confidence. Obviously, hopefully all of us have had our vaccines on here. Maybe, Aaron, you're a bit too young for that, I think. But the clubs are definitely, open for business again. And let's see what the summer looks like.
Okay, great stuff. Great stuff. Right, well, let's get into it and properly introduce Les. Les, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Really appreciate your time. I mean, I know you're not done yet, but you've had such a fantastic life in football. I wanted to just ask you at the start, looking back on what you've achieved in the game and the positions that you've held, you must be so proud and looking back with such fond memories of the time that you've had in football so far.
Yeah, I've been very lucky. I've had a really interesting career. I've done most jobs in football, both on and off the pitch now, and experienced the whole landscape of the game. And both at club and international level, at home and abroad. So, I'm lucky. I kind of fell into it. It just, one thing led to another. There was never a real career plan, which is a real problem for me now because people are asking me to help them develop career plans, and I'm not the best example, but I can't complain. I mean, if anyone in football knows that it's not all great, it's not all highs, it's not all success, and like most businesses, you have your ups and downs, and sometimes when you're up, you're really up, and sometimes when you're down, it's really difficult because of the media spotlight and so on. But I wouldn't regret any of it. I think I've learned from a lot of the downs, and I've enjoyed very much applying that learning, which has contributed to some of the successes. So no, I'm not done yet. I still I can't imagine being done. It's in your blood, and nobody ever stops talking to you about it, so you can't get away from it anyway. So yeah, I'm going to be more freelance now than before. I have done that before, and it led me back into the game. I don't intend that to happen on a permanent basis again. I like the flexibility and freedom I've got now. But very much still enjoying it and looking forward to all the excitement that is to come in the summer and how teams restructure and get ready for the new season.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many topics that we could come to you and talk about, Les. And I know obviously in the sort of prep session, I've managed to sort of whittle down to two or three that I think could be most interesting to the guys listening in as well. So kind of let's get into that. And the first one is, it's a topic that's been discussed on this webinar in the past, and that's where we think EPPP is And obviously, you've really had a sort of unique position in a number of roles that you've had to really make a really sound assessment of, how EPP was implemented, how it's been actually rolled out, and what the future of it looks like. One, do you agree that there's a sort of contrasting of views about whether or not it should carry on in its current form in the future? And two, what's your personal take on it?
Yeah, I think in terms of the future, it needs to continue to evolve. It's never really stood still, but the, if you like, the regulation, but also the structuring of youth development has gone from zero to what we have now. And I've been on that journey. I remember zero, which was kids training at 3, 4, 5 different clubs during the week, no regulation on registrations and things like that. So, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds get training at one club on Monday, a different club on Tuesday, playing for their school, their district, their county, hundreds of games a season, and lots of injuries, and particularly repetitive strain injuries. And one of the big things we learned at the Lilleshall National School was the stress fractures of the spine and things that were a big problem. So that was zero. That was ground zero. So something had to be done to change that. And back then, I was involved in the Charter for Quality, which was an attempt to do that. Yeah. And the mantra was better facilities, better coaches, best kids getting the best education as possible. Very rudimentary to begin with. And then what we've seen is a pathway towards a very highly regulated, quite a complex system, and significant battles on the way. The move from grass to computer coaches, which keeps coming up, that coaches complaining they spend more time on their laptops than they do on the grass, and so on and so forth. So it's gone through lots and lots of cycles, and it has to evolve further. So I think there is a future. I think it would be dangerous to go back to a free-for-all. We still have to remember other aspects of it around safeguarding, child protection issues, and so on. And now a much bigger emphasis on mental health and well-being and player care. So all that has to be built into it. But the one thing that does concern me is the kind of compartmentalization of players. So, you're 6 years of age, you might go to a club's development centre, which used to be almost a turn up and play and enjoy yourself, and it's now become as structured as the academies have, as a method of talent ID. Yeah. You're 6 years old, you're brought into that system, and all of a sudden you've got a label. You're at an academy when you're not. But the parents buy into it, and then what happens is there's huge competition to attract players to your development centre, because when it comes time to register, you want them on your books. And therefore, all it's done is made the competition for signing players get younger and younger and younger. And I don't think that's a good thing. I also don't think that early specialisation in football is a good thing. I come from a physical education background. So, I think that early specialisation in some sports works, but what we find is early burnout. My eldest daughter was an international skater. She skated in 7 world championships, and she was retired at 21 as a veteran. Yeah. They're retiring at 16, 17 and 18 in gymnastics and skating. So, we don't want that to happen in football. We want players to play football and enjoy it at a young age and develop a multi-skilled approach to it. Because I think that helps in decision making, and it contributes to creativity and clever play, when they are older. So I think we have to look a little bit more at this kind of compartmentalization and registration scheme, which allows kids to flow between various levels of football.
Yeah. So let's what age group would you have kids in academies at from? Would it be 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s, 14s?
I think that's the problem is the word academy, because in Holland you can play for Ajax and be a member of Ajax, but at grassroots level.
Yeah.
And then eventually you merge into becoming one of the elite players. So I think we need to blur the lines a bit between this is an academy, this is a development centre, this is grassroots. I think the lower end of academies ought to be within the grassroots structure. I think that's to do with improving grassroots facilities and environments for players to play in. So I don't want academies or clubs to stop spending money on 8 and 9-year-olds, but I want them to do it in the right environment. So for me, I think we could do with a bit of deregulation, probably up to the age at least 12, possibly up to the age of 14.
Would it be good for those clubs that can afford it to put some resources into the local grassroots clubs, maybe half a dozen or a dozen local grassroots clubs, and to bring their levels up so that when they do come into the academy a little bit later, there's not much of a gap? Is that what you're sort of thinking?
I fought for this about 15, 20 years ago, which was instead of creating these lines and divisions between grassroots and the pro game, exactly what you've just described, Tony. I think that there should be a system where in your locality you can have partner clubs, you can have community clubs as part of your community scheme, where that for me is a way that funding can be distributed lower down. There's clubs are doing some fantastic things in the community programs, and yet inside the clubs there's still this split that they're separate. And I know they are separate because they're generally charities and they're run as separate businesses. But actually, on the technical side, I'm lucky to have worked at Charlton Athletic and Southampton. Both got incredibly good community schemes, and in both those clubs, I was very keen to make sure they were merged. So Matt Targett, who's now Aston Villa, was at Southampton in a development centre in the community scheme. It's a great story, from 6 years old to the first team in the Premier League, but not because he was identified and trapped in something. He just went through the scheme, and I can't see why that can't happen across the board.
Yeah, and of course, Les, if you're released from an academy at 10 or 11, you've got that stigma, that negativity around you. And then what do? You might think, oh, well, that's me. I'm not happy with it. Or the parents might have had a bad experience and think negatively.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of it's to do with this labelling that my kids came through local football. My eldest son did go to Ipswich Academy for a little while, but he's had a career in non-league football, and now he's moved on. He's playing socially, but all through the grassroots period, where I was driving him backwards and forwards to matches, stood on the touchline, as in my early days as technical director of the FA on a Sunday pitch, watching the under-9s playing, 10s, 11s, 12s. Everybody wanted a piece of me, and it was kind of, no, I'm a dad. I'm just here for them. And I actually took on the medical bag and became the physio for the team. You could see just by mixing with parents on the touchlines that the banter around, he's been invited to go to Colchester next week. And I, part of my time was just calming people down and saying, great, go enjoy it. But, and I think that is the problem is, and in some ways, sometimes I think clubs can be guilty of not making enough of managing expectations because they want the kid to sign for them. So, there's a lot of work to be done there, I think.
You touched on a few points there in terms of sort of safeguarding and the periodisation of players and that reduction in long-term injury risk. I think we've absolutely made some progress. But the question is, how do we now produce better coaches? Do we now produce better players? I'm going to say some names to you. Dick Bate, John Peacock, John Cartwright, Don Howe. Are we producing developers of players of that ilk?
I think they are there. I think the talent's there. I really do. I think there's some really good exceptionally talented coaches. I think most of those people you mentioned were either colleagues or in Don Howe, a mentor of mine, and a real good friend. But they had a significant amount of freedom to develop as coaches. So I think we're almost trapping coaches into a framework, of qualifications and climbing the ladder and getting the next level, and they're spending a lot of time doing that and a lot less grass time where they're actually making their own decisions and failing and learning and developing. And I know, I'm working with UEFA, on what they call reality-based learning, which is like out on the grass and doing it. And I know there's a swing towards, freedom of players for decision making. But I think we are developing coaches' careers through very highly structured CPD, and tick this box, get that number of CPD points, in order to move forward. And I'm not sure that we're producing students of the game. All those people you mentioned, unbelievable students of the game, travelled the world, spoke to coaches, and made their own minds up about a lot of it. Now, we encourage that, but we actually don't have the structure that enables people the freedom to do that, because you've got to do it on top of all of the CPD things that you have to attend. And every time you attend something like that, you're not on the grass.
Do you know the other thing, Les, as well? It strikes me, these courses, particularly when you're going for UEFA A and the pro license, they're so expensive for some guys, aren't they? And it's a massive commitment of time, like you say. You're off the grass almost, and there's a lot of study involved in that. Are you sort of saying it needs to be a little bit more flexible? Or I certainly feel, and there's some people can't get on the courses, they just don't get through the selection process. So that's an issue, isn't it?
I've mentioned this a lot, and I always align it with the medical profession, which is, you have to go and do your 6-year training to be a doctor, a surgeon, whatever. But actually, I think clubs can become teaching hospitals, i.e., we can do a lot more in-house. There are a lot of good people out there who have been coach educators and have now gone into club football and are now coaches. I worked with one who I would align with the people you've just mentioned, Martin Hunter, who was our technical director under me at Southampton, but England under 20, under 19 national coach, been to several World Cups, and has an incredible background. Not involved anymore in coach education. We did a pilot with the PFA at Southampton where Martin ran a B licence course at the club in conjunction with staff at Portsmouth and Bournemouth, and now it never really went anywhere. And I think you're right, Tony. There's not enough. The volume's too big for the FA to cope with. Courses at St George's Park, so it's difficult to get on a course. Actually, it doesn't make money. It's very expensive, but doesn't make money. A lot of people misunderstand it. It's not a money-making exercise for the FA. It just costs an awful lot to do it in the environment that they do it in. And so I think that could be solved by re-engaging this army of very experienced teachers of the game who could be utilised at club level. And then you've got facilities, you've got good training facilities, and I don't see, it works really well with the PFA and the scholarship system. They do all those level 1s, 2s and B licenses in the club with the PFA regional staff. All I would say is qualify people who work in the clubs as tutors and get people learning on the job. So they're not leaving the club to go and do the training.
Which brings me on to my next point then, really, in terms of, 10 years or whatever it is into EPPP now, are we actually producing better players for first teams? Are we actually producing better players for our national team? And when you answer that, can you answer that in the context of, what smaller nations with relatively minute resources compared to us, like Croatia, like Uruguay, like other nations that are, that have beaten us and that are arguably better than us. What are they doing? What are they doing to produce world-class players that we're not, when we're discussing around this big framework of developing coaches and players?
Yeah, that's a question that's been asked for years and years, and it is a complex situation because of the different landscapes and environments of those countries, and compared to what we have here. But in answer to your question, yes, we definitely are developing. Let's put it this way: we are creating a pathway for more talented kids than we used to. So the pool of talent is growing, and the quality and level is better. Now that's probably down to more time on the pitch at an earlier age, and an improvement in facilities and the ability of coaches, particularly with the specialisation in different age groups. But we are trying to deliver that to a huge cohort of players, and we know that the transition rate to the elite end of the game is around 1%. So we are delivering to a large pool of players in order to get 1% to that level, and it's very difficult. And I think you'll find that's the same anywhere. It's just that the pool of talent in a lot of countries is smaller, and therefore the attention on that smaller pool is more focused. And then you can bring into play all of the things around environment, about it's often said that Brazil produces players on Copacabana Beach. Actually, it's the concrete in the favelas where they're not on the sand. But it's, for them, it is the only way of life. It is what takes you out of the favela if you're good enough. So the unbelievable passion and dedication and work ethic that breeds is phenomenal. And I think that's a big factor in places like Croatia, in the back streets of Zagreb and places like that. I've been there. I've worked with the Croatian FA and seen it firsthand. It's a similar scenario. They're like English kids. They're passionate about football. They get into it at a very early age and love the game, but they are not as distracted by many other things as our kids tend to be. But there is this incredible desire, because they're not given everything. They haven't got everything at their disposal. And so what they put into it, added to what those countries are doing to develop their players and improve their systems, means that there are a significant enough number of players who come out at international level who are exceptionally talented and good. So, I've always said, through the Brexit talks we had with the Premier League and so on, we don't need 50, 60, 70%. Spain have about 60% of their kids, playing in their top leagues. Our Spanish homegrown players. We don't need that. We need about 35%. And if we can do that, then our England teams will be good. They will be strong. If we try to get 50, 60, 70%, we'll just dilute it. And we won't get the advantages that come with the mix of talents that our players can learn from in English football.
Let's, in your opinion, was it a backward step for producing world-class players in this country to dissolve the Lilleshall programme, where we had all those players concentrated together I actually played with a young lad called Stephen Cook, who was a great young player. Cookie, unbelievable player, went Man United, Villa, and he was in that last tranche that went to Lilleshall. But of course, you know, Michael Owen, Defoe, Sol Campbell, they'd all come through that system of being together, the elite players in the country. Has EPPP effectively replaced that, or do you think the original system was better for producing elite players, world-class players?
No, I think the players that took advantage of what Lilleshall had to offer, like your Defoes and your Barmbys and your Joe Coles and Sol and those, that, you know, for them it was fantastic. The Nevilles didn't go there. We tried to get them there, didn't go there. Shearer didn't go there. They were all, you know, young players around that time. So when it came to the dissolution of Lilleshall, it was on the basis that we wanted the menu of work. And don't forget, you know, this was Dave Sexton, Bobby Robson, John Cartwright, Keith Blunt, you know, real experts and real good. We wanted a bigger pool of players than 16 that we had in each year group there. So 32 altogether. We calculated that really to develop a national team. And this was based on significant research around the world. You need a pool of about 250 elite players coming through the age groups. You don't need thousands, but what we were giving was a menu and an opportunity to 32 against the background of were they the best 32? Were they the most talented 32? Were they the 32 that had the most potential? They certainly would have been in that pool. But if that pool had been 100 or 200, we used to have final trials, and there used to be 250 kids coming through those final trials, and then the residential trials at Lilleshall. The gap between number 250 and number 1 wasn't that big.
Yeah.
What it meant was the top 16 were going to get selected. So we wanted more. We thought 5 academies, 5 national academies around the country would do it. So 5 mini Lilleshalls, like the Centre de Formation in France, 5 Clairefontaines, you know, which is what Gerard did there. Then we got into the politics of football, which was overwhelming, that every club wanted an academy. They weren't happy to have a centre of excellence. If Charlton had an academy, Palace had to have one. If Man United had an academy, City had to have one. So all of a sudden we were faced with this demand for individual academies, not regional academies. We're not going to send our players to a regional academy, but if you let us have an academy license and all the benefits, that we can. So what happened was clubs had to apply for a license, meeting the criteria, which was based on what we'd learned from Lilleshall. And we thought 16, 18 of the big clubs would apply. 72 clubs applied. Eventually 48 got licenses. And so EPPP is a consequence of trying to manage that size of operation. And it all started with the Charter for Quality was 2 categories, Centre of Excellence or Academy. And now we have 4 categories of academy, which has made it more complex. And then I don't even want to get into the arguments about compensation and players moving back to the club and that kind of thing. Wow. So EPPP is an answer to try and manage a very complex structure that arrived from an attempt to just increase that elite pool from 32 to around 200.
Really interesting. I wanted to ask you, at your time at the FA, we've got a lot of agents on the call today. You know, we seem to have, as education in football has increased massively, you know, the Football Association itself has seemed to have, you know, covered most bases in terms of being able to, if you're a club secretary, if you're a welfare officer, if you're a ticket officer, they offer something. Was there ever any discussion or any inkling about we've got to treat agents more of a stakeholder as a stakeholder? Maybe we need to get on the front foot of this. Was there ever any discussions about that?
I think back, going back again to the earlier days, the licensing of agents was under the auspices of the FA with some pretty strict guidelines. And Tony will remember the amount of money you had to have in a bank to guarantee as a guarantee, and then agents exams and stuff like that. And then FIFA said, no, we're going to stop all that. It's too much. It's too complicated for us to manage. So if you want, each national association was like, get on with it how you like. And basically the FA mainly manage a register. And they manage a register and they collect the fees and so on. And they monitor the pretty slim document of agents regulations. And of course, it is different for different FAs. So I think that there were discussions. There's been ongoing discussions all the time about reinstituting an agent's exam. Why is a solicitor exempt if they've got no background in football and stuff like that? And then there's the individual people's rights. So as a parent, if I want to take control of my son's career, why should I be banned from it because I'm not a trained agent? He's my son, and that wouldn't happen in any other industry. So these arguments go on and on and on. The most discussion I've ever been involved in around it has been around the Premier League shareholders table rather than the FA. I did provoke the start of an agents and intermediaries working group, and which 6 of us were on, and we reported into the professional game board at the FA, and we had 5 or 6 pretty productive meetings, and then it just fizzled out. It stopped, and that was with a view to recommendations about agents regulations. And then FIFA came back into the scenario again, and they're kind of making soundings now that they're going to come down, and so everyone's paused, waiting for what FIFA will do. Personally, I think the answers, certainly there have to be regulations, but it's a bit like, and I know we're going to come on to this, sporting directors at the moment, and there are lots and lots. I could go on a course to be an agent. I could go on a course to be a sporting director, run by, and a whole host of organisations who've set up these kind of online things. And I think that for me, it's more about education than regulation. Yes, you've got to have regulations, but let's make sure that the people who are taking this, particularly in the youth age groups that are representing young players, have a much better understanding of the industry and about player development and how to handle and manage youngsters than simply going online, paying your fee and registering as an agent. And I know from talking to, and I'm sure Tony agrees, from talking to experienced agents and big companies, they would prefer that. They would prefer to have some kind of regulation in place, which means that not everybody can just set up as an agent tomorrow and start going around car parks handing cars out to parents and players. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. Discussions have been had, but it's kind of not really getting any traction at the moment.
Okay, interesting. Les, for now, thank you. We've got some more questions to ask you a little bit later on. Anybody else? There's a few questions there, but anybody else who wants to ask a question to Les, get it in the Q&A box. But let's move on to our company profile, and let's bring in Aaron Gourley, editor at FC Business. Hello again, Aaron.
Hello there, you all right?
Yeah, very well. Thanks for joining us. Of course, FC Business has supported the Football Transfer Forum for quite a while now, but great to have you on one of these webinars as well. So really just sort of over to you for the next sort of 5 minutes or so. Let everybody know who doesn't know about FC Business what what it's all about. And of course, we're looking forward to hearing about what you guys are up to and some of the stories that you're covering now and in the future as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm a bit nervous about this. Yeah, so FC Business, it's obviously the football club. It's the business side of football club. So everything that touches from marketing to finance, governance, player performance, and obviously Les mentioned there, sporting directors have become quite a prominent feature in FC Business. So yeah, it's everything about what we do, how clubs are managing their growth, what they're doing to generate finance, money, etc., and the development of football as a whole. Really.
Brilliant. And really, what there's so much going on in football, and the sort of the industry really has exploded, hasn't it, over the last 20 years as an industry in its own right. What have been the sort of prominent topics you would say over the last year? Obviously, the last couple of weeks it's been pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But what are the things that the clubs are talking to you about? The things that they're concerned about, or the things that they need to learn about?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the main thing the last 12 months has been COVID and the problems that's shown clubs. Obviously, when everything stopped, it was almost like clubs didn't know what to do. Everything kind of shut down. There were no games. There was no income. And then it became a realization that fans weren't going to come back. So there was the financial pressures of that. And obviously, Kieran will know this. Obviously, the finances that football are based on are just so weak. And clubs have really been found out in the last last 12 months. Have really found out that it was really weak, the foundations that they were built on. So now they're having to try and figure out how they maximize their revenues, how they bring in new revenue streams, etc. And that obviously led us up until 2-3 weeks ago the European Super League and that idea. It's obviously, so football's been a little bit crazy over the last 12 months.
Aaron, are you producing a European Super League? I thought we were going to get through this webinar without the European Super League, but since it's been mentioned, are you putting a special edition out for the was it 2 or 3 days that it lasted?
Yeah.
Is it going to be a special
commemorative? Yeah, commemorative edition. Yeah,
a commemorative issue.
I'll give it 2 pages. Yeah, I mean, it took everybody by surprise, I suppose. Obviously, there's been rumblings of this league, etc. But the way they announced it was almost as if, well, it was rushed, wasn't it? Obviously, there were plans for the new UEFA Champions League and Europa League structure. And they were going to come out on the Monday, so they rushed their announcement to come out before that, and it just took everybody by surprise. And obviously, we saw what happened with fans.
So Aaron, when you put your press request to interview John Henry at Liverpool or the Glazers at Manchester United, how is that responded to then? How do they come back to you?
Silence.
You're still waiting. You're still waiting.
I fell down a hole.
But when you look at the scenes at Manchester recently, and obviously there were scenes before that where the Chelsea bus was stopped by fans protesting, it's really galvanized the fans movement, and that must be going forward. How are you viewing that?
Yeah, I think it's the difficulty I have with FC Business is it's a business magazine, and it's for the people who work within football. So for the last 15 years, we've been going since 2004, and we've been championing the commercialization of the game. So trying to help people, their clubs, drive finance, drive up the revenues that they can generate from marketing and ticket sales and commercial activity, etc. And so that's the premise of the magazine. But we sit here as fans of the game as well, and we want to see the clubs do right for us as fans as well. And so that's the difficulty with the whole situation for Football Business Magazine. We've championed this, and we've championed the the clubs maximising their revenues, but also we want them to champion fan engagement and be close to fans and have fan representation on the board. And that's a really difficult thing to manage when I'm putting the magazine together. So I don't want to get too emotional when I'm doing
Yeah.
Well, it's not just.
I think it's a really good. I think it's a really good observation, Aaron. And I wanted to ask you. One of the things I talk about a lot is how football is not treated as an industry in its own right. When we speak about manufacturing or retail or hospitality, we segment it off as an industry, and it's got drivers and everybody accepts that. With football, we do. First of all, do you think people really do understand the football industry, the intricacies of clubs, the governance of leagues, of games, and do you see it as an industry in its own right, or do you see it as I see it, as something that's just a sport?
It's a hard one to answer. Football's kind of lots of little mini industries or under one banner. So there's the game. So the 11 players, the 22 players on the pitch play a game. Then you've got the coaches and the managers, etc., that help them get on the pitch and maximise their performance. And then above them, there are the people who manage the operations. So then we've got obviously ticket office staff, security operations, stadium managers, etc. And then there's also the marketing side, so the people who have to sell the games to the fans to get them in and make it attractive. It's such a complex operation, really. I mean, our tagline is because football is no ordinary business, and it's not an ordinary business because people are so involved and so invested in it. And obviously the European Super League showed exactly how much fans adore these clubs. They feel that that's their club, and they want the best for that club, and they want to be a part of that club.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Aaron, tell us, how do people learn more about FC Business? How do they subscribe? How do they find out what you guys are producing and doing?
So obviously we've got a website you can go to, which is www.fcbusiness.co.uk, and you can have a look around there. And the magazine, it's available on the website as a digital magazine. If you want to subscribe, you can use the subscribe button it's right there on the homepage. When you go on, click subscribe. We produce 8 issues a year, and that's the best way to do it.
Fantastic, excellent. Thanks for now, Aaron. Stick around because there's a couple of questions for you. One very interesting question that I've been thinking about lately as well, to do with Bitcoin. But let's move on and let's bring in football finance expert Kieran Mcguire. Kieran, I know we've only got you for 20-25 minutes or so I'm going to get straight to it. What we want to know is, I'm keeping you well away from the European Super League, Kieran. Don't you worry. I am the variety in your life. What we want to know is, this summer, who are the clubs that you feel have got some leeway to do some business, and who are the clubs that have really got their backs up against the wall, and it's going to be anything other than free transfers is going to be a difficulty?
As far as the Premier League is concerned, a lot's going to be determined by those final couple of places for the Champions League, because the rewards of qualifying for the Champions League, it's realistically a minimum of £40 million for getting to the group stages. And if you get through to the final, we're talking doubling and trebling that, depending upon your UEFA coefficient. So Manchester United and Manchester City are effectively there. I think we have to be honest. Clearly, there's going to be one club potentially could be going through the Europa League route. Club could be going through the retention route. It's going to be an interesting scenario. So that will be positive. Actually, linking back to the Super League, it could be that it actually benefits the fans of some of those clubs who now have to win back the fans. And I'm not saying that football fans are fickle, but if you go and spend a lot of money on some baubles in the shape of talented players, then you can say, well, perhaps we got Stan Kroenke wrong. Perhaps he does care about Arsenal. Hold it, the old Joel Glazer. have we been too harsh on him? So paradoxically, those clubs that have come in for the most criticism, one of the ways of dealing with that criticism is to come across that, well, we're actually the good guys in all this. And look, here's. So those clubs could increase their budgets as we drop down through the Premier League. If we take a look at the losses of mid-tier clubs, Southampton, Brighton, and West Ham, and so on, those losses have been pretty horrendous, and that was for 2019-20. You throw in 2020-21, where you've had a full year of no ticketing revenue, restrictions or reductions in the broadcast revenue because there's rebates which are due, and we've also had the collapse of the Premier League's TV deal with China, with PPTV, and I think that's underestimated, the impact there. Therefore, budgets at those clubs are going to be tight. So it's going to be sell to buy. It's going to be utilising the loan market. And also, there will be a softening of prices because we've seen in France the collapse of the TV deal there. So French clubs will be at fire sale levels, unless they have rich benefactors. So that's where we stand as far as the Premier League is concerned. And there's also, and for people who don't know me, I'm just a nerd. And I like a spreadsheet or two. Can I just quickly share my screen? Would that be possible?
Yeah, just hold on a second.
Because we're talking about this present market as if it is independent of everything else. But if you see on this particular table, which I did prepare a few minutes ago, the clubs already have outstanding instalments in respect of previous purchases of players. So here we've got 6 clubs that owed over £100 million at the end of June 2020. Well, that doesn't go away. It's a bit like when I talk to my wife about our credit card. If we've got £2,000 already spent on it, it doesn't mean that she starts off at 0 at the start of the next month. So it's trying to get that across, perhaps, to fans. Yes, some of the clubs are due to receive money as well, but the net outstanding transfer sums due from the Premier League is around about 800 million. That's an awful lot of money, and some clubs are in a stronger position than others. So even if you take what you might consider to be a mid-tier club, we've got West Ham 111, Wolves 101, Leicester 98, Everton 83, and that they're starting on these numbers effectively as minuses. So everybody thinks that there's a reset in the transfer window, but that's not really the case. As you drop out of the Premier League and into the Championship clubs have been spectacularly poorly run on an ongoing basis over the course of the last decade. I think it's 6 years out of the last 7, wages have exceeded revenue. That is no way to run a business. From my point of view as an educator, it's fantastic. The number of case studies that the industry gives me for nothing, it really makes my job very easy. But if you're already in that situation in a pre-pandemic environment, you throw in the impact of COVID, you throw in the impact that clubs are more dependent upon ticket sales than they are in the Premier League because they don't have the benefit of the Premier League's amazing negotiations to sell its product, that it's going to be a really tough division. The net spend in the Championship in 2019-20 is going to look like it's going to be negative. So again, it's going to be utilisation of loans. It is going to be sell to buy. Yes, there will be 1 or 2 clubs who will be able to shift players. If Brentford don't go up, will Tommy move on? If so, who are they going to replace him with? But it's going to be that type of move point by point movement as far as the market's concerned.
So, Kieran, the other thing that's going on now is this fan-led review within government, and obviously, I know you've contributed into that as an expert rather than a fan. What do you think the consequences of that will be? Personally, I am not a fan of the idea of a regulator in football, a quango in effect. I don't see any other function in government that gives me confidence that that would be an effective tool. But I know you're of the opinion that self-regulation has failed. So where, what are you a fan of a regulator?
Well, yeah, I can't see the benefits of self-regulation, because self-regulation breeds self-interest, and we've ended up with clubs in League Two get 1/10 of the TV money of clubs in the Championship. Clubs in the Championship are getting 1/7 of the money of the clubs of the TV money in the clubs in the Premier League. Some form of ombudsman could be beneficial, in order really just to have to deal with the institutional problems, in that we have 3 bodies presently trying to run football. They've all got slightly different objectives, and that doesn't help. The FA, its focus is on the national team and grassroots football, and that's fine. We've got the Premier League and the EFL, who, if we're honest, don't particularly like each other very much, but that they are a necessity because of the promotion and relegation issues there. I don't really think that the fan-led review will lead to anything apart from an element of tokenism.
Yeah.
So the 50+1 rule, it's not going to take place. I can assure you. I've done the numbers. It's populist. It has appeal, but it's the equivalent of moving from driving on the left-hand side of the road to the right-hand side of the road. Actually, yes, it could be beneficial, but there's transitional issues. And it's those transitional issues. How do you compensate existing owners of football clubs for the loss of control that these rules would introduce? Fan representation on the board, I think it could have some benefits, in that at least the purpose of a non-executive director is to be a critical friend. So if there was somebody at the board out of Liverpool and Manchester United and Arsenal, when they said, we think Super League's an absolutely fantastic idea, and you've got a bunch of old white men around that table all nodding with each other because they just saying, this is going to make us lots more money, actually having that voice turn up. So have you thought about the reaction from your key stakeholder group, which is the fans?
Kieran, I've noticed Chelsea have done that already. They've moved to have a fan representative on the board, but also Chelsea's an unusual example because it's got the pitch owners as well. How does that give any hope that there's going to be some input from the fans?
Look at what the fans have. They have no voting rights on that board. They are effectively not allowed to be involved in decisions when it comes to transfers, wages, and so on, which actually I think is totally right. That should be left to the professional side of the club. Is it a way of is it a platitude? Is it throwing them a few crumbs? Yes, it is. Chelsea pitch owners is, I hate to say this, it's Ken Bates' greatest ever achievement, as far as I'm concerned, because it has given protection. Perhaps his only great achievement.
Could that be replicated in other clubs, or is that it's the stable doors the horse is bolted long ago?
Well, I think the problem that we have there is that it would require implementation. Now, are the Glazer family going to do that at Old Trafford? No. Why should they? It's counterproductive, and and for all the criticism they get, ultimately they are a public listed company on the New York Stock Exchange. Their first and foremost responsibility is towards the benefits of shareholders, not fans.
I tell you what hasn't been, with all, we're going back to the Super League, unfortunately, but when the Glazers came, FC United was created, and I haven't seen it in any news or any of the disturbances that were around the ground. I didn't see any FC United referenced at all, and they were the club that was a breakaway club from United.
Well, it has been on the BBC. I've worked for Al Jazeera. I've worked for ESPN, and they've been going to FC United as well. So it is now effectively an independent entity in its own right. They've actually now got their own stadium, and they are trying to progress. If you want some old school football, then it's a great place to go. I mean, it would the constitution was actually created by one of my colleagues when I was teaching at university in Manchester.
Right.
But Kieran, will you accept that clubs like FC United and other fan-owned clubs, they're not without their own issues? FC United's balance sheet is nothing to write home about. They've obviously took on a lot of debt to get that stadium going. Now, I was in receipt of a club that went into administration out of being fan-owned as well. Is it still sort of a bit, certainly my position, it's a bit premature to make this presumption that fan-owned clubs equals good businesses?
Oh, absolutely not. I'm very, very wary. Again, it's a populist, simple solution. Fan-owned clubs. We've seen Wycombe Wanderers go into fan ownership, and then they've had to go and be rescued by an American lawyer, and they got promoted on that. And hats off to everybody at the club. Amazing achievement to get up to the championship.
Yeah.
I've had quite a lot of dealings with people at Portsmouth. Why do clubs become fan-owned? It's because they've been passed around and kicked about so much that they're practically dead. So it's only the fans that tend to be willing to pick them up at that particular stage. Yeah. As soon as Michael Eisner came in, the fans know that there's a natural ceiling from a financial point of view as to the amounts that you can spend. Because if you get up to the championship, the average losses of a club in the championship are around about £25 million a year. Well, where are the fans going to find that?
Yeah.
Then if we look at the Spanish model, which is presidential and fan-owned, you end up with populism. Because if you've got two people standing to be president, one of says, I'm going to run this club sensibly with a balanced budget, and our aim is to be a sustainable club. And the other one says, I'm going to sign Harry Kane. Who are they going to vote for? So the presidential model doesn't work. What we need to do is to just dial back. Fan ownership for me doesn't work. The naked capitalist approach of profit maximization doesn't work when you've got the contrast with the trophy asset clubs of Manchester City and Manchester City, Chelsea, you could say Leicester, Everton. From a business analysis point of view, fantastic. To see those contrasts, but it simply doesn't work.
Kieran, League One and League Two, I was a huge critic of the salary cap, and rightfully, sort of legally dissolved. We're obviously back into the salary cap management protocol, which is obviously a sort of percentage of turnover. As I know you always say that you deal with the historic data, but I know that you speak to a lot of owners as well. Do you think even the one season that we had with the salary cap, can you see a sort of knock-on permanent effect in League One and League Two of wages decreasing?
Yeah, I think wage pressure will simply come down to market forces this year. We've got an awful lot of players who will be out of contract. We will have more clubs than existed 12 months ago saying we can't pay you. So it's not a case of not wanting to pay. We've had 12 months without our major revenue source, and if we take a look at the clubs in League One and Two, realistically, between 30 to 45% of revenue is coming through the turnstiles. They've lost that, and that's lost permanently. Now, some of the fans have been amazing in that they've rejected the rebates and that they want their clubs to exist. And yes, from a sustainability perspective, that's all fantastic. But I think the overall pressure on wages, especially whether there is no sign of increased broadcast revenues coming through the Premier League, so that's not going to flow through into the solidarity payments, that is going to put, at best, a static on wages, but I suspect it's going to drive them down.
The other one, I know you've got to go at 22, so I'm just trying to get the questions in. The other one I wanted to ask you about is, and I've been talking about it for quite a while, I wouldn't describe it as a black cloud in the distance, but it's certainly an anomaly that I think we need to have a discussion about, and that is national clubs out-competing league clubs. So, you've got the likes of, Stockport buying players from League One clubs that are playing in League One. They're leaving League One to go into the National League. The financial regulations aren't anywhere near robust. It's starting to get a bit unbalanced, isn't it?
Yes. Again, it comes down to owners who treat clubs as trophy assets. They like the idea of no regulation, and effectively it is the Wild West in the National League. We've got the clubs rebelling against the board itself, and
Right.
I was contacted last night by somebody at a National League club to give me the latest details, and that's going to be glacial in terms of progress, unfortunately, because there's vested interest left, right and centre. So you will see a two-tier National League, and I think some players will be attracted by what's on offer there, even though they don't get any TV money compared to what we're seeing in League Two. You know, the League Two club is getting the thick end of £1 million from parachute paper, from Solidarity and the EFL deal.
Kieran, I'm going to put you on the spot here. You mentioned him earlier, and we were talking about transfers, and your club Brighton might need a striker, and you mentioned Ivan Toney of Brentford. Now, obviously, he's got 30 goals so far. I'm going to run a poll alongside this, so hopefully everyone, I'm going to launch the poll now, and it's just a little bit of a fun exercise to see how much you would value Ivan Toney at. Kieran, what do you think? So everybody who's on the call can vote now. What's your thoughts? And Brentford have done so well in terms of, you know, the player development model and selling players on to the Premier League. Neil Maupay, Ollie Watkins, and before that, you know, there's a lot of examples. Ben Rama. So my question to you is, if Brighton are going to sign him, or another club of that sort of stature, what do you think they'll be able to pay, and what do you think the valuation will be?
I think a lot will depend on the club. I think Brighton won't. If Brighton sell Bissouma, which appears to be the case, then a lot of that will be reinvested. I would be surprised if Brighton went beyond 25 million for a player who ultimately has not played in the Premier League. They paid 16 million for Maupay. They've got a solid return from him. Not spectacular. People will point out Ollie Watkins, he costs an extra 10 million. And then it's not just the transfer fee. You've got to look at the total cost over the contract length as well. And you know, Brighton, as you know, just as well as I do, they operate a relatively tight ship in terms of the range of wages that they're prepared to pay. And Tony Bloom's not prepared to break the structure for anyone.
Yeah. Okay. We'll give the poll a little bit longer to run. If you haven't voted yet, get your vote in. We're looking at the moment just over the 20 million mark is the most popular. So you've got another couple of minutes to vote. But no, thanks for that, Kieran. I don't know, would West Ham potentially? There's a few clubs there. So let me just share the results. Can everyone see that there? It's 20 to 23 million was the most popular. And there was a couple of people who went for 15 to 17. That was quite popular as well. I wonder if he'll go for less than that. So it just gives us an idea in this particular very tricky marketplace.
Absolutely. Kieran, really appreciate your time. I know you've got to get off, but thank you so much for that. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Okay. Cheers, guys. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely, no problem. Right, we've got quite a few questions to get through, so we are going to do that. But Tony, I know before we get into the questions, you wanted to speak to Les about sporting directors.
Yeah, Les, my first question, and obviously we have a lot of people who are working in clubs, in all sorts of roles in clubs, and also some agents who are looking to transition from the agency business. Obviously, they've done a lot of deals, who are interested in this sporting director role. And I've seen there's, you know, a lot of the Premier League clubs now have a sporting director. Even there's been recent job adverts at Walsall, Newport, Rochdale. Can you just tell us a little bit, just talk around how is it best to get into that sort of role? What steps do you have to take? And you know, how you know, back in the day, how you sort of went on that journey?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say, Tony, is there is no one size fits all for this role. It has to be a very bespoke role according to the needs of the club. And when I say the needs of the club, that probably means the ownership and the board or the senior execs in terms of how they see the culture of that club developing and so on. And also in terms of what structures they already have in place, which impinge upon the work that a sporting director would do. So, you know, I was in fact sporting director of Southampton for nearly 10 years, under 3 or 4 different titles, none of which were ever sporting director. But essentially, mine was more like a North American VP model, where I was the vice chairman football strategy, and Martin Semmons, who's now currently the CEO, was vice chairman business strategy, and we didn't actually have a CEO. So all football strategy came under my remit, and all business strategy came under Martin's remit. And therefore, I managed the entire football structure and entire football culture and strategy. That's probably the ultimate end of the scale. I was obviously vice chairman. I was a director of the club and a board member, and reported into the owner. Then I think at the other end of the scale, you will have clubs where the chief executive plays a significant role, particularly in finance and budgeting and negotiations, and is the final sign-off for payments and so on and so forth. And therefore may need some assistance with football experience and knowledge around recruitment and also managing football operations. And some clubs that translates directly into head of recruitment, because outside of the talent ID process and the recruitment and running the scouting system, somebody else, there might be a performance director who's doing the medicine, sports science and analytics side. There might be a finance director or CEO who's actually doing the deals and doing the negotiations. So I think what is important for anyone aspiring to be a sporting director is to kind of say, what tools do I need in the box for the ability to be at the Les Reed end of the scale? What have I got now, and therefore where might I fit and build towards that? But I do think that what getting into that role is, at the moment, appears to be the pathway seems to be through either being at the club a long time, possibly as a director of youth or academy manager, and being stepped up to a higher role on that side, particularly in the football operations type jobs, or through recruitment and talent ID. And my advice really would be, if you've come, whatever route you're in at the moment, if you're an agent, if you're a chief scout or a director of recruitment, and that could be your way in, make sure you develop and learn about the rest of it and how a club runs and what the business of the club's like. The biggest thing for me when someone's already is in the role is understanding, what do the owners want from this club? So we've talked about the big clubs at the moment, understanding what the Glazers want and understanding what FSG want at Liverpool. There might be very different things, and probably are. And therefore the setup at Liverpool will be different to the one at Manchester United. How much does the executives play in the processes that a sporting director would manage, i.e. recruitment, transfer negotiations, etc., etc. Understanding what they want and how they see their club going forward should guide them as to the qualities of the person they want to recruit, but also should guide the person being recruited into their suitability for particular roles. Now, the problem is, I saw the Newport advert and I saw the Walsall advert. They both said the same thing. And essentially they're asking for everything. And so that's the anomaly, because what will happen is everyone will apply for those roles. They'll have 70, 80 people to sift through, and only by doing a very difficult process of sifting, filtering, will they find somebody that they think suits the role that they really want, not the one they wrote down. And,
So
and
it's finding out what the actual job is before you
Yeah.
actually, even if
Yeah.
you get an interview, you need to know what the job actually is.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if you're networking, if you're trying to promote yourself, then what you should be able to promote is the fact that you've got essential management and leadership skills, that you can lead a team of people, whatever that might be. Might be in a recruitment department, might be in a performance science department, but leadership skills and the ability to manage a department and people, and you need to have. You certainly got to be confident, particularly if you are going to be involved in recruitment, and you've got to have the ability to negotiate and run a team. I think a lot of people seem to, we always get Jurgen Klopp signed all these players. Well, Jurgen didn't sign all those players. Somebody else did. It might have been Michael Edwards doing all the legwork and bringing those people to the table, running his team of people. And then Mike Gordon might have actually done the contract. That might be the way they work. I'm not saying it is, but certainly Jurgen didn't do it. And Michael Zorc doesn't sign everyone at Dortmund. But what Michael Zorc does is run a team of people who contribute to the final decision making around whether a player is going to sign or not, and then may take over the negotiation with the agent. So teamwork is essential. No one person can be the panacea to a club's ills by going, you know what, we need a sporting director. Let's go and pinch Monchi and bring him over. He'll do the job.
He would.
That doesn't work.
Les, what about, I know guys at the moment on the FA Talent ID level 3 just finishing off. What's the 4 and 5 look like? Is that something that you would recommend for this cohort of people to look to do?
Yeah, definitely. I think 4 and 5 give you a really good ground base in all of those skills and essential things that you need. And some stuff, it's like anything. Some stuff on the syllabus, some of the people taking it will already be pretty well experienced in.
Yeah. Yes.
And that ability to share that knowledge within the group is really valuable and certainly increase your network. And then there will be things that you will learn that you'll never use simply because in the roles you have, someone else is doing that.
Yeah.
But it's well worth knowing what it is and what they do.
Yeah,
so I would definitely advise that as a really good foundation for going forward. But it qualifies you in as much as you get a certificate, but it doesn't qualify you for the job.
Yeah.
And it is a role that evolves on the job. You may go into the job with a certain vision and so on, but it is definitely a role that changes. Yeah. And of course, as I've experienced, it might change when the owner changes, and then that all that stuff that around philosophy and culture change might change as well.
And again, I want to get to the other questions, but I'll ask you one more question on this because I think it's really important, Les. Is that, and it goes back to being an industry in its own right. The people that are actually recruiting the sporting director, i.e., potentially the owner, potentially the chief exec, do they have the knowledge of what they're recruiting?
I mean, the key thing, if I go back to what I'm doing now, what reconsulting is about advising owners, particularly new owners, or providing some kind of intermediate sporting directorship until they get what they want right. And I did that. That's what I did at Southampton. But what Marcus Liebherr as an owner knew, and Nicola Cortese, who worked for the bank that did the deal and then became the executive chairman, knew at that time was they didn't know anything about football strategy. Now, what I would be encouraging owners to do is don't bring a Les Reed in after you've bought the club and then say, what should we do about the football? Is bring a Les Reed in while you're going through that process so that you're clear on what you're buying is going to meet what has got what in place or what it needs in place if you do buy this football club. Absolutely. Now, but having said that, they were very honest in that they needed that advice. And therefore, I was able to build a structure based on their needs. So that they were pretty clear. Marcus wanted to be in the Premier League within 5 years after a 10-point deduction administration. Wanted to play style of football that the fans would enjoy and he would enjoy, wanted to make the club sustainable as a mid-table Premier League club with potential to qualify for Europe, which we did. And he wanted to have an aspiration of a significant number of players being home developed for two reasons. One, because Southampton had a reputation for developing players, and two, because it meant sense sustainability-wise going forward. So therefore, the academy. Once I had that brief, I knew what I could do, and that's what owners need to do if they're going to appoint a sporting director. Is to go work through what is the brief, what do we want this club to look like in 5 and 10 years' time? Because that's the role of the sporting director, not how many matches do we win in the next month. Yeah. That's the job of the manager. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And so that for me would be advice to owners, is be clear on what you want and what you need.
Fantastic. Right, let's get into the questions. And actually, Aaron, a question for you to begin with, but it's a nice sort of segue out of Southampton. The question is from Craig, and he asks about the implementation of Bitcoin and blockchain and fan tokens, etc. into the game. And of course, Southampton have come out and said they're going to potentially pay their player bonuses in Bitcoin. Tell us what you know. Tell us what you're covering.
I don't know a lot about Bitcoin, if I'm honest. I genuinely, I'm not the person to ask it. And in terms of he asked about fan tokens, etc. I don't know how. It's a strange one. I don't know how they intend to make it work. I always see Bitcoin as using football as a tool to spread its to kind of get people to notice it. I mean, you attach Bitcoin to football, and then everybody takes notice. So that's sure. Kind of, and so you know more than me. I'm sure you dabbling in Bitcoin. Yeah, I'm sure you.
Badly,
you're
badly,
the Bitcoin man. But yeah, I think in terms of Bitcoin, to give you the honest answer, I don't know too much about it.
I mean, Tony, if you're doing a deal this summer and the club goes, the appearance fees are going to be paid in Bitcoin, and actually, Tony, a bit of your agent's fee is going to be paid in Bitcoin. What are you going back to?
I wouldn't have. I'd like it in cash, please. Dollars, notes, whatever you want, but in cash. Bitcoin for me is just something I've got no clue about. I'm absolutely. It would throw me that if they said, we have to pay in Bitcoin, I wouldn't know where to start. I'd have to get some advice.
Yeah, I think I'm exactly the same. I wouldn't know where to go with it unless they said the return is going to be X millions. Then yeah.
A question from sort of Yarno, and I'm going to put it to both Les and Aaron. Les, what's the best way, do you think, nowadays, modern world, here and now, post-COVID, for people to reach football clubs, to reach the people in there and other agents as well? You know, do you think football clubs are as approachable as what they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
Sorry, you mean in sort of partnerships, commercial stuff,
for agents to make contact, or for people in industry to make contact and build relationships with clubs?
Yeah, I think essentially it's finding out who is clearly the point of contact for the kind of business that you're thinking about, and trying to get a direct relationship there, because you know, when you talk about approachability of football clubs, in our club at the time, I was clearly the point of contact for agents and anybody involved in that side of things. And there was no point in them going to somebody else. So if they went to our non-exec chairman, Ralph, or if they went to the owner, they would never get to the owner, but if they went round the back door, it'd always end up back to me, because people would go, well, that's his role. So I think clubs who've got that in place generally are quite happy to have someone who is a point of contact, and that's where you go. And again, it's not consistent. You know, some managers like to be the one that gets the first dibs. You know, if an agent's got a player, information is always power in a football club. But generally, managers nowadays are not making decisions on what they're going to spend and who they're going to spend it on and how they're going to spend it. So for me, I think clubs are approachable because they need the help. They need the ability, even with all the data analysis and the black box stuff that we've got nowadays. You know, you still need a network of people you can double check and confide in and get some intuitive information from. So I think clubs are approachable if they're sensible. They are, because they will rely on good relationships the other way around as well.
Aaron, some guys on the call as well that from organisations looking to work with clubs. How do you see the environment is difficult?
I mean, there are lots of ways to get yourself known, I suppose. There's social media. Things like LinkedIn are a great tool to promote what your expertise is. Have a look, see who the key people are that you need to speak to, and just making yourself known within the industry, joining in things like this and getting your name out there. There are events. Obviously, the last 12 months, there's been no events, there's been no football. But when we can go back out there and go to events and go to games, it's about mixing with people and just making enough contacts, get your business cards, swap business cards, etc. Or alternatively, find a reputable magazine like FC Business, give us lots of money and we'll do our best.
Or Bitcoin, Aaron, or Bitcoin.
Right. No Bitcoin.
I was going to add, we start the Football Transfer Forum started as a networking live event, and we've missed 3 events due to the pandemic, but we are thinking about putting another event in at the back end of the year, so that, Giano, that would be an absolutely perfect place for you. We've all been selling our wares this morning, and I've got a copy of the book there as well. So it's
excellent. Okay, we're coming to the end of today. Before we do depart, I just want to share with you guys the next webinar that Tony and I are doing in conjunction with the European Football Agents Association. Tony, it's a great one to do. Italy. Inter Milan have just broken Juventus's grip on the Scudetto. So many interesting things financially going on in Italy as well. The Chinese investment that's wrapped up in Italy under massive threat, that has a knock-on effect for what goes on here. But of course, it's still an absolutely fantastic place to get players to get players from. I'm sure there's going to be so many agents that are interested to learn how you actually do business in Italy. And Tony, I know you lived there for a while, so you are the absolute man to come to. Tell us about why everybody should sign up to it.
No, the series, Doing Business in series, was the brainchild of the European Football Agents Association. Ryan and myself are hosting it. We're looking at the big 5 leagues, and we've done Germany, Spain, we've done Portugal, we've done France, we've done Brazil, we've done America. USA, and they've been fantastic. So the last 2 remaining are Italy at the end of this month, and the European Football Agents Association. They always get big name, either lawyers or agents or people that are really key individuals in that marketplace. And it's really just a crash course on, listen, if you're going to do business here, you need to know this information, how you register as an agent, who you deal with, how it all works in Italy. And each marketplace has got its own nuances, its own rules and regulations that you need to be aware of, and you need to navigate your way through. So it's been a very popular series that we've been doing, and it's drawing to a close with Italy this month, and then the big one, England, next month, Ryan.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to it. And again, for all the agents or indeed people in clubs that are on the call that are interested, I've learned so much about the individual territories. I mean, France was the last one that we had on. I mean, it's going to be very difficult for any English agent that isn't already registered in France to do any business directly in France moving forward as a result of not only Brexit, but French law. There's so much in there about individual players' rights. In Germany, they only get 6 weeks injury pay. That's obviously not something that we're used to here. So there's so much to get out of it. names attached to it very, very shortly. But as Tony said, we've had some stellar names across the series, and I'm sure it will be absolutely the same again. I want to thank our guests, Aaron from FC Business, and of course Les Reed, absolutely fantastic, and of course Kieran as well, who had to shoot off. But Tony, I thought that was absolutely fantastic. Last word from yourself before we go.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Thanks, guys, for all your input. I think, Les, we're going to have a part 2 with you. I don't think we only covered half of what we planned to cover. And we'll schedule that in at some point. But thanks, Aaron, again. And, let's see how this summer goes, and we'll see you next month.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, guys.
See you later, mate.